To mention in ahead, the discussion of today's topic of pleasure and enjoyment would be separated into two parts. This is the first part where I will go into detail about anatomize the pleasure and enjoyment among individuals nowadays. From a daily perspective point of view, we tend to separate our desire into normal desire and surplus desire. Drinking alcohol is fine, but becoming drunk is not encouraged. Playing video games is acceptable, but not anymore when one becomes addicted. We can derive an equation here. Greed equals normal desire plus surplus desire. But considering this phenomenon from a dialectical logic, people would never drink alcohol if they cannot get drunk. People would never play video games if they cannot get addicted. If there is no more surplus desire worth pursuing, we lost the whole desire itself. Lacanian psychoanalysis considered desire to be always surplus because the whole meaning of desire is the part where it is thought as a surplus. Christmas is coming up soon, so when we receive a gift, we get happy more because we draw more of our attention onto the decorated box itself rather than what is actually in the box. Sometimes we will not even receive what we truly want, but do we really gain pleasure by just seeing a box covered with a colored paper? The answer is obviously no. The box is just an intermediate of our desire. So in this situation, we cannot tell whether which part of the whole process of opening the box is normal desire and which part is the surplus desire. What is the true purpose of the desire then? It is not the item itself nor the box itself, but the point where we gain the pleasure is actually the instantaneous moments when we tear the wrapping and open the box. So what Lacan here would say is that there is no zero level of pure enjoyment. It is always a surplus. So here we would jump to the next part of analyzing enjoyment, which is the death drive in Lacanian psychoanalysis. A famous quote from Camus: "There is but only one true serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. Whether people suicide because they have no hope, or whether they can gain pleasure from killing and torturing themselves." Another quote from Zizek explains this concept. Death drive is the basic component of our lives. Death precisely operates beyond the pleasure principle. Death drive is essentially the impulse where we want to gain certain pleasure for destroying the order that we are accustomed to. For example, while one is studying, the rational part of that individual propels him to study hard, get a good grade, go to a good college, and live a good life. But at the same time, there's a hidden impetus that allures you to break all the restrictions, the rules, the orders that is imposed on you. And that impetus would tell you to start playing video games, even at that moment you don't really want to. This is actually the problem most people in the world is facing right now, or commonly perceived as procrastination among youth. When you actually want to do something, you would find yourself struggling between your vivid imagination of you actually achieving the final goal and the upset reality of yourself not doing anything or becoming addicted to certain things that are not beneficial to you. When people realize that they are not capable of actually doing anything, when they realize they have to face their own failure and challenges, they will enter this endless loop, and the loop itself generates a kind of pleasure or enjoyment. So the failure itself, since it brings pleasure in pain, becomes a bizarre nominal victory for one person. So why can't you just start working hard and achieve all your goal? Because you know that once you achieve your goal, you can no longer gain the pleasure from your own imagination. To give an example, if I fell in love with a girl, I would imagine a trip I planned with her to Japan. We get to chat all day long and relax, and at a wonderful night, I would take her to the fireworks ceremony. We would kiss each other under the sakura tree where the flowers are falling off. This is such a good imagination, but maybe when I actually achieve my imagination, I might not find it to be exciting as I expected. In Hegelian philosophy, this death drive is the parasite that's inside the core of every human being. We are all driven by the power of death. The repetition in the loop is the thing that brings you pleasure, and the desire in the loop is essentially desiring for failure, which is essentially a type of self-oppression. For example, a man came across with a woman. His ultimate goal is not to fall in love with a woman, but to reach the conclusion that this woman is not a perfect one. What he really wants is to have sex with a woman and reach the conclusion that this woman is not the best he can get, so he can just leave and find the next woman. I have to stress here that this is just an example, not my personal belief. Objectifying women is not my intended purpose here. So essentially, the man is just desiring the failure in the relationship between he and that woman, so he can gain the pleasure of being in a temporary oppressed relationship again. Pure enjoyment without oppression is impossible, but you cannot get rid of the enjoyment itself. To give a few examples of surplus enjoyments from Zizek's speech. So from a grand point of view, people sometimes would demonstrate high level of morality that they would sacrifice their most valued items for greater purposes. To be specific, during the Second World War, many youths would gain pleasure and fulfillment by getting into the army and die on the battlefield for the good of their country, since they are restricted by such patriotism. In this case, the spirit or this patriotism is oppressing the youth and forcing them to devote their lives to a very obscure concept that I failed to illustrate here. I have to mention in ahead that I hate the next example, and I am actually disgusted by it. So in 2012, United States Representative Backing, conservative Republican, proposed the concept of legitimate rape, where a victim shows signs of consent or participation, get wet or excited. This is a typical demonstration of surplus enjoyments, or more exactly, oppressed enjoyment. While the victim is brutally violated and suppressed by the power from a male, they can morally kidnap the victims by saying that they sexually gain the obscene pleasure from the whole process. So, although being disgusting, this example nevertheless illustrates that pleasure and oppression are always linked with each other. So, pleasure is equal to displeasure. We gain pleasure from displeasure. In the same way, we gain displeasure from pleasure. So in the next video, I'll go deeper into investigating this core of human spirits hidden inside the loop, and discuss how we can transcend this endless loop in our imagination.